Okay, I want to start this deep dive by putting us right in the middle of a scene. I want you to just visualize a room. Let's say it's a club, maybe barely past midnight. The bass is so heavy, you can feel it vibrating in your chest. The lights are cutting through smoke, and the air is just thick with that mix of, perfume and sweat and electricity. And right in the center of it all, there's one person who just commands the space.
The magnet.
Exactly, the magnet. They're moving from person to person, laughing, flirting. There's this intensity to them. And to anyone watching, this person looks like the absolute epitome of freedom.
Right. Total confidence.
And you think, wow, that person knows exactly what they want and they're not afraid to go get it. But we have a stack of research today that asks a really uncomfortable question. What if we're completely misreading the signal?
It's the classic error, isn't it? Judging the internal machinery by the external paint job. Because if we could just pause that scene, peel back all those layers, and look at the neurology firing underneath, we probably wouldn't see a pursuit of pleasure.
What would we see?
We'd see a desperate, high-stakes scramble for safety.
And that is the paradox we are wrestling with today. We're stepping into that gray area between shame and survival. We've got clinical psychology papers, some heavy studies on neuroadaptation, and they all point to one often really misunderstood reality.
The link between sexual trauma and hypersexuality.
It is, on the surface, just a complete contradiction. It defies normal logic. I mean, if you burn your hand on a stove, your brain usually wires you to fear the stove.
You avoid it.
Right. But here, we're seeing the brain almost urge the person back toward the very thing that caused the wound.
And that's the why, isn't it?
That's what I want to figure out.
Okay.
Because when I was reading this, I kept hitting this wall of just why? Why would the brain, which is designed to keep us alive, double down on the risk? But the deeper I got, especially into how trauma reorganizes neural pathways, I realized we're giving the brain too much credit for being logical.
And not enough credit for being creative.
That is the perfect word for it. Creative. We tend to view these trauma responses like hypersexuality as, I don't know, a kind of brokenness, a malfunction.
But the research suggests we need to flip that entirely. This isn't a malfunction at all. This is a masterclass in adaptation. It's the brain taking a terrible situation and just engineering a way to survive it.
Even if the method looks destructive to the outside world.
Especially then.
So let's get into the engine room. Let's talk biology.
Yeah.
Because the old metaphor is the smoke detector, right? The amygdala gets stuck in the on position.
Right.
But the papers we read suggest it's more complex than just a stuck alarm. It's not just that the alarm is ringing, it's that the person who knows the code to turn it off has, left the building.
That's a great way to put it. It's a reference to the disconnection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. In a regulated brain, the amygdala says, hey, loud noise, I'm scared. And the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of the brain.
The adult in the room.
The adult in the room, exactly.
Yeah.
It says, relax, it's just a car backfiring, we're safe. They talk to each other.
But in the survivors we're discussing, that phone line is cut.
Precisely. The trauma was a moment of such profound powerlessness that the brain just fundamentally reorganized its priorities. It decided that thinking and analyzing they were too slow.
Not efficient enough for survival.
Not at all. So the prefrontal cortex, the logic, the context, it goes offline, it gets dampened, and the amygdala becomes the dictator.
So you have this internal world that is just screaming. I think one source described it as a constant low-grade hum of terror.
Unsafe, unsafe, unsafe. It's not always a full-blown panic attack. It's just a vibration.
And this is where the behavior comes in. The brain is desperate to stop that hum. It's scanning for anything, literally anything, that will provide a hit of dopamine or oxytocin.
Anything to separate the person from that feeling.
And this is the part I think is so hard to grasp. How does sexual behavior, especially if sex was the weapon used against them, become the solution? You'd think that would crank the alarm up, not turn it down.
And that's where you have to look at it through the lens of the reward system, not the event. The brain is conditioned. It learns patterns very, very quickly.
Yeah,
So if in the past a sexual encounter provided a momentary spike in validation or a fleeting sense of power, or even just a moment where the chaos of the world narrowed down to one single predictable act, the brain remembers that.
So it's not seeking sex in the romantic sense, it's seeking the chemical shift.
Correct. It is a transaction. The brain is saying, I am drowning in cortisol and fear. If I do this, I will get 5 minutes of relief. It doesn't care about minute 6.
Or the shame that comes an hour later.
Not at all. It's an immediate survival mode. It's like a drowning person grabbing a piece of driftwood. They aren't checking to see if the wood is rotten. They just need to float. right now.
It's a biological coping mechanism disguised as a lifestyle choice.
Exactly. And to the person, it feels like they're making a choice. But the research calls this compulsive regulation. They aren't choosing pleasure, they're medicating anxiety.
This brings us to a concept that I found, well, both fascinating and heartbreaking. The idea of appeasement. We all know fight or flight, fight, flight, freeze. But there's a fourth F that came up, fawn.
Fawn is the least understood survival response, but for this, it's probably the most critical. Fawning is essentially appeasing the threat to ensure safety.
It's the keep the monster happy strategy.
Yes. Evolutionarily, it makes sense. If a predator or an abuser is much bigger and more powerful than you, fighting means death. Running means being chased.
But if you can make yourself useful.
If you can flatter the threat, align yourself with it.
Yeah.
You might just survive.
And that brings us to the yes. The research went deep into why a survivor might say yes to something they don't actually want. On the surface, yes looks like consent.
It looks like enthusiasm. But internally, yes is a shield.
How so?
Well, think about the internal calculation. If a survivor has a history where saying no looks violence or anger or rejection, then the word no is coded in their brain as a trigger for danger.
No brings chaos. The unknown.
But yes.
Yes is predictable.
Yes is the path of least resistance. It buys time. It buys management. The source material calls this control as the illusion of safety.
I want to double click on that. Control is the illusion of safety. Because that person at the club, they look like they're in total control. They're initiating everything.
And that is the key. If she initiates, she isn't the victim. That's the story the brain is telling itself.
If I walk up to him, then I'm the one making it happen.
I am the predator, not the prey. It's a way to rewrite the script of the trauma. In the original trauma, things were done to them. In hypersexuality, they're the ones doing it.
It's an attempt to snatch the steering wheel back.
Even if the car is heading off a cliff.
That is such a heavy distinction. It's fear management disguised as consent. It really challenges how we look at, well, at wild behavior. We see someone acting out and we think, oh, they just have no boundaries.
But what we're saying is they have extremely rigid boundaries. It's just that their boundary is, I must control every second of this so I don't get hurt.
Precisely. And the tragedy, as pointed out in several case studies, is that it works.
Until it doesn't.
Let's talk about the doesn't. Let's go back to our visualization. The lights come up, music stops, the person goes home. The source material was pretty brutal about the aftermath. What's the texture of that experience?
Emptiness. Profound, echoing emptiness. Because while the act might have quieted the alarm for, say, 20 minutes, didn't solve the problem, the amygdala eventually realizes, wait, we aren't actually safe. We just distracted ourselves.
And then the shame kicks in.
And the shame feeds the loop.
Of course.
It creates a feedback loop. You feel shame, which registers as emotional pain. The brain hates pain, so it screams, fix this, get relief. And what's the only tool the brain has learned to use for relief?
The same behavior that caused the shame in the first place.
And round it goes, a closed system.
I want to pivot for a second because I know some listeners who might be survivors are thinking, I don't do this. I did the opposite. I wear baggy clothes. I don't let anyone near me. And the sources did mention this divergence.
Absolutely. This is crucial. We're talking about hypersexuality today, but avoidance is the exact same coin, just the other side.
Okay.
Both are reactions to the same central truth. Intimacy is dangerous. One person manages that danger by avoiding it entirely. That's your flight or freeze response. The other manages it by trying to control it.
The fight or fawn response.
Exactly. So we shouldn't judge one as prudish and the other as promiscuous.
They're both just people building fortresses. One fortress has a moat and a drawbridge that never, ever lowers. The other has a big party out front to distract any invaders, but inside.
It's the same scared kid. That's a beautiful and accurate way to put it. They're both just strategies for safety in a world that feels hostile.
This brings me to the concept that, honestly, it stopped me in my tracks. I had to read it 3 times. The principle of predictability over happiness.
Ah, yes. This is one of the fundamental laws of evolutionary psychology. And it explains so much human misery. The primitive brain, the part that's just concerned with survival, it does not care if you are happy.
It doesn't care at all.
It doesn't care if you're fulfilled. It cares if you are predictable.
Because if I know what's coming, I can prepare for it.
Exactly. Uncertainty is the enemy of survival. If you're walking through a dark forest and you don't know what's behind the trees, your stress hormones are maxed out. That's biologically expensive. But if you're in a cage...
A cage is terrible.
It's terrible, it's limiting, but you know exactly where the walls are. You know when the food comes, your cortisol can actually drop because the threat is mapped.
So when we see someone stuck in a toxic cycle, repeating these patterns that leave them feeling empty, they aren't choosing misery.
They're choosing familiarity.
Fear becomes familiarity.
And to a traumatized brain, familiarity feels like the closest thing to safety it can get. The brain looks at a healthy, slow, vulnerable relationship, and it just says, danger, unknown, red alert.
That is wildly counterintuitive. A healthy relationship feels dangerous because it's unfamiliar.
Yes, it's an uncharted map. And if your whole survival strategy is, I need to know the ending so I don't get hurt, then a situation where you don't know the ending is terrifying.
So you run back to the chaos.
You run back to the club. You run back to the behavior that hurts you simply because you know the rules of that game.
It's like we're programmed to choose a known hell over an unknown heaven.
We are, until we interrupt the program.
And that's where I want to land today, because we've painted a pretty intense picture here. But the articles didn't end there. They talked about neuroplasticity. They talked about hope. If the brain is creative enough to wire this survival system, can it rewire it?
It absolutely can. But the method is, it's surprising. It doesn't start with stopping the behavior. It starts with compassion for the behavior.
Which is really hard when the behavior is ruining your life.
It's incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But you cannot shame yourself into safety. Shame is an accelerant for the alarm system. If you look at your hypersexuality and say, I'm disgusting, I'm broken, you're just pouring gas on the fire. You're increasing the threat level.
So what does the alternative look like?
It looks like functional gratitude. It looks like looking at that part of yourself, that magnet at the club, and saying, I see you. I know you're trying to protect me. Thank you for keeping me safe when I felt powerless.
You validate the intent.
Even if you changed the method.
Right.
You acknowledge that these were tools. They might be rusty, sharp, dangerous tools that hurt you now, but at one point in your life, they were the only tools you had.
And then, once we stop fighting ourselves,
then comes the slow, kind of boring work of reteaching the body. The source material emphasizes that healing often feels dull.
Dull.
Yes, because chaos is exciting. Adrenaline feels like aliveness, safety, real safety. It feels quiet, calm. And for a survivor, calm can feel like dead.
Or like the calm before the storm.
Exactly. So you have to gently teach the nervous system that quiet does not mean predator approaching. Quiet just means quiet.
It's about increasing that window of tolerance. Being able to just sit in a room without the music, without the flirting, without the control.
And just be. And realizing that you're still alive. That the world didn't end just because you stopped performing. That's where the prefrontal cortex comes back online.
That's where the executive control returns.
You start to see that you don't need to manipulate the moment to survive it. You can just experience it.
Moving from surviving the interaction to actually connecting.
Exactly. And connection requires vulnerability. Hypersexuality is the armor against getting hurt. Healing is taking that armor off piece by piece and realizing the air feels pretty good on your skin.
We've covered a massive amount of ground.
Yeah.
And I keep going back to that image from the intro. That paradox. The idea that the loudest person in the room might be the one who is internally the most silent.
Just waiting for a signal that they're safe. And if you were listening to this and you recognize that of anxiety, or you recognize that need to control every interaction, I hope you take away one thing.
What's that?
You're not broken. You are a survivor who got really, really good at surviving. Your brain did exactly what it's supposed to do.
But maybe, just maybe, the war is over and you can start to put down the weapons.
It takes time. It's not a switch you flip. It's a practice. But yes, the war can end.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought, something to chew on that goes beyond just this topic. We talked about predictability over happiness. And that's a human condition, isn't it? Not just a trauma response.
It is, and it begs the question, where else are we doing this?
Right. Where else in our lives, our careers, our friendships, are we choosing a situation that makes us miserable simply because we have a map for the misery?
Where are we mistaking the familiar for the good? And what would happen if we were just brave enough to step off the map?
That's the scary part. But I think the sources tell us that's where the real life is.
Understanding the why is the first step. Once you see the mechanism, you can stop being a passenger and start being the driver again. A real driver, not just the illusion of one.
Thank you for going deep with us today. This is a heavy one, but I think an important one. Take care of yourselves.
Be gentle with yourselves.